Income tax 2020. Claim the Child and Dependent Care Credit Questionnaire on the IRS website at irs.gov, irs.gov. Come in, relax with Income Tax 2020. Here we are on the IRS website at irs.gov, irs.gov. We're going to be looking for a tool that's provided by the IRS to make a determination as to whether or not we would qualify for the dependent care credit and possibly some estimate of what and how much that credit would be. So I'm going to search then for child and dependent care credit in order to locate the tool. This could be a good tool if you have kind of a question scenario as to whether someone would qualify. Tax software might be able to help in a similar way going through a similar kind of questionnaire, and or if you know someone who has questions about this, possibly a client or someone you know, this is a place that you can point them to go through and run through the questionnaire. It could also help people get prepared to make sure that they have the documentation and information necessary for the tax preparation process so they can provide it to the tax professional. So I'm going to scroll down to the topic down here, topic 602, Child and Dependent Care Credit. We're going to select that item. And then at the bottom of this one, what I'm looking for is this item here, which is asking, am I eligible to claim the Child and Dependent Care Credit? So you might have to do a little bit of searching around. You can copy the URL link for it. But you can also try typing in, searching for this exact name, but sometimes the IRS website's a little bit picky. It's not quite like Google, you know, it doesn't. So you might have to search around a little bit to find it. Once you have the URL, you can provide that to others. We might provide you with the URL for it. So here it is. Am I eligible to claim the Child and Dependent Care Credit? This interview, so it's an interview process. If I scroll down to the bottom of it, then we have this begin process. It goes through like an interview, similar to a questionnaire you might find in tax software, like an H&R Block tax software or a TurboTax type of thing. It says the interview will help you determine if you're eligible to claim the Child and Dependent Care Credit for expenses paid for the care of an individual to allow you to work or look for work. So information you're going to need: the date of birth of the child or dependent that received care. If married, the filing status, so you need the filing status. The tool is designed for taxpayers who were U.S. citizens or resident aliens for the entire year for which they're inquiring. If married, the spouse must also have been a U.S. citizen or resident alien for the entire tax year. For more information about non-resident or dual status aliens, you can see international taxpayers at the link here. Disclaimer: conclusions are based on information provided by you and the responses to the questions you answer. So I won't go through the full disclaimer. Let's go ahead and check it out. Let's go ahead and begin the process. So we're going to have a question about am I eligible to claim the Child and Dependent Care Credit? Let's go ahead and continue there. And then it says the tax year you're asking about. We're going to be asking about 2020. 2020 is the tax year. We'll continue on with that one. Was your marital status? What was your marital status? We're going to go ahead and say married was the marital status. That's probably the ones with the most kind of complexity to it, because two spouses might need to show working or some other conditions such as a student or something like that. Do you and your spouse intend to file a joint tax return for 2020? We will. If you you file married filing separate, then most likely you won't be able to take the credit unless you have some kind of strange exception to the rule there. Were expenses paid or incurred to care for a person under age 13 or a person who was physically, mentally unable to care for himself, herself in order to work or look for work? So that's going to be the general rule of why we have the care. And again, it has to be normally a student under 13 unless it's going to be a person who has the exception, physically or mentally unable to care for himself or herself. I'm going to say yes on that one. And then, of the expenses incurred to allow you to work, what portion of the expenses was paid for the care recipients to attend kindergarten or higher grade? So at kindergarten or higher grade, I think the process here, or the rationale, is that there is public schooling available at that point, as opposed to possibly preschool, where possibly not. And therefore, if you're paying for kindergarten or upper grades, you're paying for something other than simply care, possibly, because, you know, you might have the public school access. So we're going to say none here. So it's going to be something other than kindergarten or higher. Let's continue on for that one. And then were at least some of the expenses paid in 2020 or prepaid in a prior year? I'm going to say yes. Many of the expenses I'm going to say they're paid in 2020. And so we will continue on for that one. What portion of the care, if any, was provided by one or more of the following? Your dependent or your spouse's dependent if you were married, your child who was under age 19, a person who was your spouse at any time during 2020, the parent of your qualifying person if your qualifying person is your child and under age 13. So if you check if any of these apply, then you're not going to get basically the benefit related to them usually because they're kind of related parties within the transaction, so within the care providing. So I'm going to say none here, and we'll continue on. Now, did you have earned income during the year? I'm going to say yes, we had earned income during the year. And did your spouse have earned income? So I'm going to say yes. This would be like W-2 income or something like that. And if you say no here, which we might come back and take a look at in a second, then it's gonna then say, well, does some other exception apply, such as possibly being a student or having some other condition that might be applicable in that case. So recipient of dependent care, click the add button below to provide first names for every person under age 13 or who was physically mentally unable to care for himself, herself, for whom you paid child and dependent care expenses. If you select the add button by mistake, you can get rid of it. So I'm going to say add. And I'm going to just say that we have Sam here. And then I'm just going to keep it at that. Now, if I added another one and then I didn't have anything to put there and I said, go ahead and continue, then it's going to say, well, you have this thing here with nothing in it. So I'm going to say, remove that thing and then remove it. And then they'll let me go. So then the relationship, I'm going to say son/daughter. Date of birth. What was Sam's date of birth? I'm just going to go 1 January 2000, let's say 2018. And so we're going to continue. So it's under 13, obviously. Are you claiming Sam as a dependent on your return? We're going to say yes. Sam's our dependent. Is Sam the child of divorced, separate, or never married parents? I'm going to say no. Now, if it is a separation involved, then the questionnaire is going to get into who gets the claiming of the deduction or the dependent, and therefore the expenses that are going to be paid, and so on and so forth. So you can go into that. That could be a useful tool for this questionnaire to kind of help out with. But I'm going to go the easy route here. Did Sam live with you for more than half the year? I'm going to say yes. Sam lived with us. And continue. Does Sam have a taxpayer identification number, like a social security number or an ITIN? We're going to say yes. They're valid to the IRS. The government sees them as the number. Are you able to obtain each care provider's name and address? I'm going to say yes. We can tell the IRS who the care provider was. If it was an institution, we can provide the name, address, and hopefully a number for them as well. So are you able to provide each care provider's taxpayer identification number? That's usually the EIN number, or if it's a person, possibly the social security number. We're going to say, yes, this is something that you got to make sure if you're a tax preparer, you're telling the client to get. Tell me the amount, tell me the address, tell me what their EIN number was. They should know what that is, so ask them for it, please. So will your income tax be greater than 0? I'm going to say, yeah, we have tax that's greater than 0. Because that means it's a non-refundable credit. That's why they're asking that. So if your tax liability is 0, you're not going to get any benefit from it. So do any of your dependent care expenses also qualify as medical expenses? So you can't double deduct on medical expenses and dependent care typically is what they're kind of getting to there. So I'm going to say no, not a problem. Did a state social services agency pay you a non-taxable amount to reimburse you for some of your child and dependent care expenses? So if you got reimbursed for it, then you can't really take the deduction because you didn't really pay for it because we got reimbursed for it. So it's not really something that we paid for. So I'm going to say no. Did you receive dependent care benefits from a dependent care benefits plan or flexible spending account? So did we get money from a flexible spending account or like from our employer or something where we already got a tax benefit and now we would be, again, kind of doubling up if we took a credit with it. So we're going to say no. We didn't get any money. We paid for it and we didn't get any reimbursement. So was any of the dependent care provided in your home? So if it was provided in the home, then there's going to be more questions in terms of who did the providing. If it's provided outside the home, then it's more likely you have a business with an EIN number that we can deal with. So I'm going to say no here for now. If you hit yes, then it's going to be a little bit more complicated. We might go into some more complications after we do the primary one. Did you prepay 2021 dependent care expenses in 2020? So I'm going to say no. That's going to be our cutoff kind of problem here, where we're saying if we're on a cash basis method, we typically get the deduction when we paid the cash. But you can see people cheating on that method by basically paying, 5 years in advance or something like that to try to take the deduction today. And so there's going to be some skepticism. So I'm going to take, again, the easy route and say, no, we didn't prepay. It's all for 2020. So did you pay dependent care expenses in 2020 but incur the expenses in a prior year? So if you, same cutoff kind of thing. If we paid it in 2020 but we incurred the expenses in the prior year, they're trying to see if you're kind of doubling up on the expenses. So I'm going to say no, we paid it in 2020 and we took the deduction in 2020. So here we have it. We have, am I eligible to claim the child dependent care credit? You are eligible to claim the child and dependent care credit. Sam is a qualifying person. Compute the credit on Form 2441 and attach it to the tax return. The maximum amount of qualified expenses that can be used computing the credit is $3,000. So that means we can spend up to $3,000, and then it'll have to calculate how much tax will be on that. So they weren't brave enough to try to put in the actual tax calculation on it because it'll be dependent on your AGI income limitations and whatnot. So they're basically saying that you get down to the $3,000 of expenses that you can spend as to whether, and then you're going to have to work out the worksheet to see whether or not you can take the deduction. Now again, if we look at our table over here, this is page 2 of the form 2441, and you can see basically this table will help us to kind of determine what the amount of the deduction will be. So in this example, we got the $3,000 that they capped us at, and then it was multiplied times 20%, and that was the $600. So you have to go somewhere else to do the calculation, but this can help you out to determine kind of what you need in order to go through the process. Now, I won't go through it again, but just note that if you have some more complex kind of issues, then you can kind of go through it, and that might help you out as well. Like if you have the person that works in the home or something like that, or if you have someone that's like a relative, but they're not a dependent, like a qualifying child or something like that, then this questionnaire could be helpful in those kind of more unusual situations. Or if you are not working for whatever reason, or if you're married and your spouse, one of the spouses isn't working, doesn't have any earned income, but they're a student maybe, or they have some disability or something like that, then this questionnaire could help with those kind of strange situations. Or a situation where you have a joint custody situation and you're questioning about, who can claim the dependent and who can claim the expenses that were paid, even though they might be a dependent, on one return or the other. Those kind of things. This questionnaire might be helpful to gather the information you need and just basically make sure you have the support necessary to back up any claims that are made on the tax return with regards to the credit.